gamers all around the universe. Today, I'm going to be showing you how to play French in Season 2. Haha, I don't need the French, Lamar, just make knights. And that's it, the guide is over. Thank you guys for watching. But in all seriousness, I made Season 1 guides for 8 civs. In Season 2, I'm going to do the same. I already made English guide, which you can check out on my YouTube channel. It's a different from Season 1. For French in Season 2, we got a similar style, but a different build order. There's been quite a lot of changes from Season 1 to Season 2, and French has more or less remained the same civ. You go knights, you're aggressive, and you force your opponent to make units, and then you just kill them, right? So what I'm going to teach you today is the newest, I guess, build, newest variation of the French Knight Archer pressure, where you get second TC behind your aggression and you kind of force your opponents to stay in feudal. You know, with the knights being super strong in feudal, you force your opponent to stay in feudal, and then you extend it as much as possible. You don't let them get to castle, and you try to end the game there in the perfect case scenario, or at least you get enough of a lead in feudal so you can end the game in castle pretty comfortably. It kind of starts very similarly to the Season 1 guide, with the addition of a second TC so that you can pump villagers while being aggressive behind it. Now, at the end of this video, I'm also going to go through each matchup, just like I did with English guide, basically how to play each matchup specifically, or how to, at least what to pay attention to, the strengths and weaknesses of each matchup for French. So, first things first, when you play French, you want to build your house at least 2 tiles away from your TC, so eventually when you build farms, they're all around TC, nicely positioned. French, again, we had recent scout changes, right, where the scout takes 5 seconds extra to build, and it also regen a lot less. So you can go 2 scouts. Against Rus, you always go 2 scouts. But with French, you can also stay on 1 scout. I would say it depends what civ you play against. Like if I'm playing against English, maybe I stay 1 scout because denying English sheep is not a big deal. But maybe if you're playing against French mirror, or if you're playing against HRE or China or Abbasid, where they want their food under TC, maybe going 2nd scout to be able to deny and get food for yourself is a not bad of an idea. But you can go 1 or 2, like I said, depending on your preference and the matchup. So, the build starts off pretty much exactly the same as the Season 1. You go 8 on food, 4 on gold, and then you're going to go 2 on wood. So, let me show you, and this is where already we have, difference from what we used to do and what we do right now. So, we're going to build a lumber camp, and the moment we have enough resources, we're going to be aging up with 4 villagers. 4 villagers is the most cost-efficient / time-efficient way to age up to feudal with any civ. If you're trying to get to feudal with something in mind, like rushing a knight or rushing something, so you'll age up with 4. You're gonna put only 2 on wood, and the next villager that comes out, so you'll have a 4 or 5 on food. You want to make sure you build a mill, because you want to get early wheelbarrow. So what we're going to do now, get that mill and just leave this worker there. You don't need to send it back because it's travel time, you're wasting resources. Once it builds the mill, just let it go on the berries. Not a big deal. The moment that finishes, we're going to get wheelbarrow straight away, and with the next 50 wood, we're going to get a house to make sure we're not housed. And again, I'm building it 2+ tiles away from TC and from the mill, so we can make farms later really nicely. The way the build order works... Oh, by the way, the whole time, after the 2 on wood, the whole time I have been rallying on food. I forgot to mention that. So I have 8 on food right now, and on sheep, I got 1 on berries, and we're gonna go up to 12 or 13 on food. Villagers, we still have 4 on gold, and once these 4 villagers finish on the School of Cavalry, you're going to send them to the woodland. We're going to instantly queue up a knight. I'm not going to be micring much because this is against an AI, so I'm not going to pay attention too much to the knight or the scouting. But with the first knight, as French, your goal is to hit whatever weak spot you can find, okay? So if you're playing against a civ that wants to go for 2nd TC, you can go for their stone and try to deny that as long as possible, especially if it's Abbasid or Chinese. If you're playing against English, maybe try to hit up the gold villagers. If you're playing against Mongols, again, try to harass gold. Basically, try to harass whatever you can. Like, whatever there's open villagers. If the villagers are from Delhi or Abbasid and they're on berries, try to snipe that. But don't overcommit and take damage on the knights, and definitely don't lose the knights. Especially now that chivalry is a lot more expensive, so it's a lot harder to get to. You don't want to be taking unnecessary damage on the knights. So that's something to keep in mind. These 4 workers will enable you to constantly produce royal knights, and having like 13 villagers and food will also enable you to produce knights, villagers, and archers at the same time. Now, I do want to say there are 2 versions of this build. I chose the one that I think is personally better, especially if you're lower leagues. You don't gotta think about it. You just do this build and you'll be fine. But just to mention, the variation that I'm talking about is if you're, a little bit more experienced, what you would do now for the second option is you would only get 200 gold after you get your age up. You get wheelbarrow. You only get 200 gold for 2 nights, and you would pull these villagers instantly to get stone. And instead of having 13 on food, you would have like 8 or 9. And basically you would get second TC and then add more production, like 2 stables and 2 archer rangers total, and then be aggressive. So what is the difference between that build and this one? That build delays the aggression. Obviously you will have 2 knights to be aggressive, but it delays any further aggression. So if the opponent makes spearmen, you won't be able to do much. So if you're playing against civs like HRE, they might even hit castle before your production kicks in. So this build that I'm showing you here is more aggressive. You do get your second TC a bit delayed, but that doesn't mean you're behind. You will still most likely get TC around the same time as your opponent or a little bit later, but because French has faster villager production, you'll still be fine, which is why I suggest this one. But like I said, if you're more experienced, what you can do is get 200 gold, get 2 knights, and then go into the stone and wood, second TC, and then you'll add more production. So with this one, while having 6 workers on wood, the moment we have 150 wood, I'm going to add an archer range. And once we have 12, 13 villagers on food, 12 is fine, 13 is fine as well. We're going to be making a mining camp to get the stone, and we're slowly going to move into second TC. The second TC, time-wise, will be quite delayed, so it might seem like it's too late, but don't forget that you're also putting pressure on your opponent, so whatever they're doing should be delayed as well, because they'll either have to make units or they're going to take damage. So, yeah. The moment archer range finishes, I'm going to constantly produce archers, constantly produce royal knights, and constantly produce villagers. Again, you're going to use knights wherever you can do damage. If you're playing against a civ that wants to go fast castle, then hit the gold. If you're playing against a civ that wants to go for the stone, then try to camp the stone as much as possible. And you're getting archers pretty fast. So even if they have spearmen, you can already send this archer across the map and start shooting at their spearmen, shoot at their stone villagers or gold villagers, whatever, right? And the point of this build and the point of this opening is, obviously, if you can kill villagers, but the point of it is to delay whatever your opponent is doing. And like I said, force them to stay in feudal, force them to make units, or they're going to take damage. So that is the main plan. You can go 5 villagers in stone, 5, 6 villagers in stone, and then you're going to rally villagers onto the wood because you want to make sure you have enough wood and stone for the second TC. The question I get often is when to get chivalry. Like, if you have 3 knights and all of them are banged up and they're like on 5 health each, then get chivalry, right? But if you're just poking around and your knights are still kind of healthy, just keep making knights until you have 3 or more knights that are on very low health, and then get chivalry to heal them up. And if a knight is like under 20 health, I would say just send it back home and let it chill right here until chivalry is completed, so that, you know, you don't lose them, right? It's better to save them. So, as I'm collecting food, you can see my food and gold count are pretty good. And if you decide to get chivalry at any point, you'll have enough gold to get that with 4 villagers on gold. I'm gonna keep getting stone. Now once I have 300, I'm gonna put the rest on the wood, and I'll cut archer production for a tiny bit so I can get my second TC out. Now, again, the other variation has second TC a lot faster, but it is a little bit of a tighter timing, and you have to be a little more experienced with French and higher rank. If that's your thing, then try it. But this, I would say, this build is more straightforward and easier to kind of punish your opponent, which French is all about, right? Putting the pressure. So when I have 400 wood, I'm going to make a TC. And with French, you always want to make your second TC on deer. For example, in this game, I make second TC here because the barriers are super close as well. You could potentially make them on that side, but you know, it's a little bit farther away. And one thing to remember is once you clear all these deer, you don't have anywhere to rally your second TC. Like if you rally your second TC from here to this gold, it's going to take quite a while. Even to this gold, it's going to take quite a bit. But if you place your TC next to deer and it has a secondary resource like this wood line, or let's say there was a gold here, you can just rally your second TC there. Now, do you go rams or do you not go rams? That depends on how the game is going. I'll show you in a second. I'm going to speed it up a little bit. So I like to build my second TC with 8 workers. And one important thing is you place the TC in the middle. So if I was placing TC here, let's say, I will put the TC right here. What that will do is that will spread out the deer nicely around your TC. And then you select 2 villagers and you're going to snipe deer. So they're right next to your TC, which is very, very important because you don't want to chase them away. You don't want to run around and you know, push them. So you want to kill deer as they're close to your TC so you get the maximum efficiency. And once this TC finishes, you're going to have 10 villagers on wood. You're going to rally this TC onto the deer and you're going to rally your main TC onto the gold. Why? Because right now what you need is more food income to support your TCs and more gold income to either upgrade or to produce knights or to go castle. So you don't need more wood at this point. 10 is more than enough because 10 villagers on wood, what that will allow you is to create more production buildings, you know, create houses, create economy buildings, do upgrades, whatever, or go blacksmith. Now, if you are doing a lot of damage and you think you can finish the game, then you can rally one of your TCs onto the wood line, maybe even upgrade double broadaxe, get blacksmith, go for rams and try to end the game. But I think it's always better to simply just keep producing units. You can add another stable and another archer range, so you go 2 stables, 2 archer ranges. Just keep producing units, keep forcing your opponents to trade. And the strength of the French and what you should focus on is the food on the map. Your biggest point is not to necessarily run under the TC, but wear them out until a point where they don't have sheep, they don't have berries, and they have to go on these berries, or the deer that are not close to their base. And that's when you engage into fights, and that's when you force them to fight, because the other fighter, they're gonna lose all the villagers and lose the food income. So that is your main point of entry at this point in the game. One thing to note that I didn't do too great here, but try to build your stables and archer ranges like this, and then one here, and then one here maybe, so that later on you can just put a castle or a keep right here, so that it reduces the cost of all your archer range units and all your stables from the keep influence that French have. So that's a small tip. And if you put it like this close to DC, the keep will also protect like the DC, it will protect the farms and any other economy you might have. Even if you decide to not all in with rams, I would still say get blacksmith and maybe get +1 weapons for +1 arrow damage, and then get +1 armor versus arrows, just so you can dive the towers or dive TC with your knights if needed. But like I said, as you're chopping more and more wood, you can add more production, or you can start walling off if the opponent is being aggressive. There's plenty of options to go for, and it kind of depends on you. But that is the main strength of French. Be aggressive and kind of figure out what the opponent is doing. If you're playing against a civ that he's also producing like pure horsemen, or he's producing I don't know, knights as well, then you don't need archery ranges. Archery ranges are only added on start as kind of like a blind counter to the spearman. Later on, if the opponent is just ditches the spearman, it just goes pure knight or something, then add more stables and just mass knights. Now, let's talk about individual matchups. As you can see, the build order hasn't changed too much. The only difference in French Season 2 compared to French Season 1 is that you want to add that second TC, so you're slowly building up economically throughout the game. And basically, your advantage with French against any civ is not only you're building up a worker count lead, but you also are forcing your opponents to be out on the map, you know, in order to get food. And by doing that, you're getting basically free kills while your side of the map is uninterrupted, because it's very hard to be counter aggressive against French in general. Now let's talk about specific matchups. English versus French, you should definitely be having the map control, and this is one of the matchups where I would say you can even go for second TC after the first two knights and not have to do archers, because it's a little bit of a weird matchup. If you make one archer or you're trickling in archers, the longbows can just pick them off, so you're not gonna get your full value with that first fast archery range. So you can just skip it, go second TC, and then decide if the opponent is pushing a lot of spearmen, you can add archery ranges. If the opponent is going castle, then you can skip archery ranges completely and you can just go pure knight and kind of get the lead that way. Late game, obviously English has a big lead because of network of castles and their farms. So your strongest point against English is in castle age, because English is the weakest in castle, and French has pretty good timings in castle, especially if you go Royal Institute, that allows you to get imperial upgrades from university for your units, such as the 35% extra health. So if you're playing against English, going like 2 TC into castle, you don't need to be too aggressive against English, because it's one of those civs that has all their food under a TC. You know, don't overcommit in Feudal forever unless you're doing some serious damage, because they'll most likely have farms and you can't really deny that because they're under TC. So your biggest strength against English is castle with knights and archers, or knights and French crossbows, depending what the English player has. And with the 35% extra health on your knights, you should be able to kind of overpower the English. And you definitely don't want to go in Imperial, like I said, because they do have an advantage there. Playing against Mongols, recently we got the tower nerfs, but still Mongols are able to tower rush. It's not as good as it used to be, but they're able to. That's something you should be aware of. Mongol in general, I feel like is not too great against French. Because one of the Mongol main strats is going like Lancers, but even if Mongol rushes castle, which is most likely what you'll be seeing these days, even if Mongol rushes castle, what will end up happening is, like, let's say he's castle and you're still in Feudal with 2 TCs, you will still get economic lead from 2 TCs, and your knights, even though they're Feudal versus Lancers, right, they're castle knights basically, you will still be able to trade just fine, because you're going to have more economy and you'll be able to produce more knights, plus your knights heal. One thing you should be worried about is getting tower rushed on gold, but in general, I think this is a pretty good matchup for French. Mongols recently got a buff, but I still think this is a pretty good matchup for French. Regarding how to be aggressive against Mongols, or should you be aggressive, that depends on their spawn. So if their TC is on gold, obviously you're not going to be able to do any damage because on their gold. But if their gold is far away or something, you can always try to kill villagers. So that's something to pay attention to. And kind of like English, Mongols will have pastures, just like English have farms. So it's going to be hard to do eco damage early on. French versus French. I recently did a video on this, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. I recently did a video of how to play French versus French. It's also on my YouTube channel. It's like a game analysis from one of the games that I've had. It's basically going fast second TC on both sides with spearmen and knights. So what you want to do is raid with knights as much as you can, and then defend the enemy raids with your spears while you're both getting to castle. That is the general play. And then in castle, I would say just stick to spearman knight or spearman horseman. Like I said, there's a video on it that goes in great detail about this matchup, so check it out. French versus Rus. This is usually a French favored matchup until Imperial. Rus is often referred at the top level as like weaker French because they work very similar to one another. They try to get map control and they try to kind of leech off of all the resources on the map, even opponent's side, and they both have knights. The difference is Rus knights are weaker than French knights because French knights can heal. So if you ever enter kind of knight versus knight battles, that's good for you. And Rus players will most likely try to avoid that at all costs. The reason for that is, well, if you enter knight versus knight battle, like I said, it's not going to work out too well for them. And French knights are going to be much better at raiding because of their healing. Also, the boar strategy from Rus, while it is good and viable against French, French can just, you can just keep going at the boar, keep charging, and their villagers are going to go in tower, and then you move away, you charge again, and you disrupt the economy quite a lot. What most likely you're going to face from Rus players in this matchup is either like super all-in with spearmen archers, in which case you'll just make knight and just archers to fight that. Even mass archers is going to be good against that. And the other thing you might experience in this matchup is Rus going for fast castle and then going into crossbows or even horse archers and trying to take relics. And again, it's completely fine for you because you still have feudal knights and you can contest those units even in castle. So one of the big points that you can see with French is it's okay if you get castle second and your opponent gets castle first, because you can always fight knights versus whatever castle units they have, because you should have the numbers because you have better economy. So yeah, and relic denying is very important, and with knights that should be pretty good for you. A3 versus French. A3's worst matchup by far, and the reason for that is they want to get to castle as fast as possible. French is very good at denying that. So what you want to focus is denying their food, number one. Don't let them leave their base to go to grab outside berries or deer, and just hit their gold over and over with knights. Harass them as much as you can, and you won't kill them. It's very hard to kill HRA, but what you are going to do is force units, force them to make towers, and most important, force them to stay in feudal for as long as possible while you're building up your eco lead with your villagers and your second TC. And yes, even in this matchup, you will go second TC. And this is one of the matchups where you definitely want to go for the knight into archers opening rather than fast second TC, because you want to put as much pressure as you possibly can straight away. After that, it's all about denying relics. By the way, versus Rus, avoid Imperial. As French in general, you want to avoid Imperial. It's not a great save in Imperial, so preferably end your games in Feudal or Castle. Versus Rus, versus Streltsy, you want to avoid Imperial. Versus Holy Roman Empire, they don't necessarily beat French in Imperial. It all comes down to how much economy you both got there. And if they got like 5 relics in Imperial and you got 0, you're probably gonna lose. But if you took like 3 relics and they got 2, then the game is pretty much equal and playable on both sides. Delhi Sultanate. Delhi recently got a lot of nerfs, and in lower leagues, Delhi is the least played civ, so you're not going to see a lot of Delhi. But the main point how to play against Delhi is just try to deny their sacred site as much as possible. And Delhi works off of a lot of food because they want to like mass units. Your main thing is surviving the initial sacred site capturing. Not let them capture it, delay it as much as you can, snipe scholars as much as you can with your knights. And because they're so food focused early on, they will go through their food extremely fast, their berries and sheep, the starting ones, and they're going to be forced out on the map quite fast, where your knights come in and mow them down. So the main thing is deny the sacred sites and don't let them get all the free juicy gold. If there's an option, there's like a boar next to a sacred site or there's a deer pack next to a sacred site, put your second TC there. It's going to act as a massive tower and you're going to get food that you want with the second TC. So just a small tip. Delhi in Imperial, I mean, no one really goes, but Delhi is really scared in Castle, so be careful of Delhi in Castle because of the elephants, and they might do keep drops and stuff like that. And if that's the case, you kind of have to not let them just arrive at your base and build keeps, right? You have to build knights and whatever units to counter their unit comp. But in that sense, Delhi is like very committed in feudal and very committed in castle, and they'll most likely not be looking to go Imperial. Abbasid, you want to deny the stone. That's your main focus, because you want to delay their second TC. So basically the way the matchup works is you're both going to be on 2 TCs, and if you do your job of being aggressive and try to deny the second TC, you will either have a faster second TC or you will have it at the same time as them, which benefits you because you're going to be producing villagers faster. So your main focus is their stone early on, and just try to pick off their spearmen with your archers, and then they're going to hold horsemen, so you want to engage knights into horsemen, archers into spearmen. Later on, I would say maybe they're a tiny bit better in Imperial, but not so much to where it's like, oh, it's GG kind of thing. I would say this matchup can go either way. Abbasid definitely has an advantage if they don't take any damage. I know this is kind of a stupid statement, but if they get their second TC just fine and the game progresses into castle, their spearmen are really, really, really strong. So that's something to be aware of. But if you manage to do some damage, you delay the second TC, then the matchup kind of turns very one-sided for the French. So it can go either way. And then Chinese, I saved it for last, it's a mix of HRE and Abbasid, I would say, where they want to tech up, you know, to get their dynasties. They want to tech up to castle. They want to play very defensive, protecting their resources like HRE, but at the same time, they're going to try to get the second TC like Abbasid. And just like HRE and Abbasid, they like to mass units, especially in the current patch. So you should expect a lot of horsemen and a lot of spearmen from them. Main focus should be obviously on stone, denying the food. They're also very quick to drain their food sources because, you know, they produce villagers at 13 seconds per villager with song and second TC. So they need a lot of food to actually sustain their worker production, and they also need a lot of food for their unit production. So that's something to consider. Late game, Fire Lancers are really, really good, and with all the Chinese siege just being better than French, you don't want to necessarily go super late game. But like I said, that's kind of same for French in any matchup. They either have an equal matchup in the late game or you're at a disadvantage. But that's why main strength of French is Feudal and Castle and putting pressure in your opponent. So if this is the style you like, then French is the same for you. And hopefully with this guide, I'll help you a little bit to update your Season 1 how to play French guide. And I would also advise anyone who's watching these guides, whether you're watching for English, French, or the future guides that I'll make for other civs, I would also advise you to watch the Season 1 guides for your civ. Maybe I've said something there that I forgot to say here, or maybe you like those build orders and openings more. For English, for example, I said that both Season 1 guides that I made and Season 2 are viable in the current meta and the current patch. For French, I would say this is very similar to the Season 1. It's just an improved version, but maybe there's a tip there that I gave you guys that I didn't do here. And for the other civs, I still have to yet create more guides for them for the Rus, Mongols, HRE, Delhi, Chinese, and Abbasid. And once I do, I'll keep you guys updated on which matchups are good for them, what to focus on with its strengths and weaknesses. And the next guide that I will be making is Mongols or Rus? Probably Mongols. We'll see. Anyway, if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Let me know which guide you'd like to see next. If you're watching on Twitch, let's keep going.